Let's talk about Blinks, baby. Let's talk about you and me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Solfate podcast, where we talk with builders and founders in the Solana ecosystem. And we did that today. We had an amazing builder, an amazing founder. Second time he's been on the show, Chris Osborne.
Chris is awesome.
He's one of my favorites.
Not even my new favorite person, because he was my favorite person when we talked to him the first time. But he's so freaking awesome. He's so articulate. I kind of just like man crush on Chris. It's a problem.
He does look like Ryan Gosling. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah, and brilliant dude. But we focused the conversation mostly around Blinks and Solana Actions, which Nick had a huge part of. So
I just work here.
Voice kind of broke there. Nick kind of shifted a little bit into kind of like interviewee mode in this episode. Basically talked to Nick and Chris about their involvement with Blinks and Actions and what this is all about, what it supports, how it's so enormously helpful to the ecosystem, but also just to boosting the, what the internet is and what it can do generally. I am so stoked right now.
Oh, you're telling me. It's been a long couple of months, lots of thoughts and in every possible way. And I've had a unique opportunity to work very closely with Chris and the Dialect team, many of them, phenomenal team. Blinks and Actions are incredible. And any listeners, if you have any thoughts on Blinks and Actions, my DMs are open. Chris's DMs are probably also open too.
Likely. Well, let's jump in real quick. Just a quick shout out to Phantom. We partner with Phantom. We're thrilled to work with them. They're sort of the preferred wallet of the Solfate ecosystem, and they do support Blinks.
They do support Blinks. You can go into your, I believe it's under experimental features. You can enable Blinks, and you can experience Blinks directly on Twitter right now in your Phantom wallet.
Do it. All right, let's dig in.
Let's go. Nothing in this podcast is or should be considered financial advice. Any opinions and thoughts expressed are solely those of the individual. They do not represent the opinions of any entity. Enjoy.
Real, right?
Yeah, everything's real. It's all physical things. A lot of people do think it's fake because it's like the static background the entire time.
It's real, but it is just a blanket that you have draped in your basement behind you.
Yeah, it's my blanket. It's like that's what I tell people.
He's in an unfinished basement.
Yeah,
that's incredible. You did a good job. You are like a true DevRel, like really level
real
70.
Time. Let's. I do want to make sure we talk, for the sake of like publicity, about like Dialect's role and sort of juice Dialect. Not that Dialect needs us, but that I think that we try to do that on this show, right? Is like provide a platform to boost businesses in the ecosystem. But I do want to start from the beginning. My understanding is that Nick is closer to the beginning than Chris. Is that true? How did this go? What's the time frame here? Or I
think Chris probably be closer to the beginning. John Wong basically like mentioned the idea, and I'm like, oh, finally we can rename Solana Pay. I'm in.
Yeah, well, actually, that's true, because we were talking about smart transactions a year and a half ago or whatever, right? So it's like that's actually true. Was this like, is Blinks just the extension of what we talked about,
maybe
way back when?
If you want me to kick off, I can give my version of the story.
Do it.
Nick, I would love to know when we kind of because it's all a blur to me at this point.
Let's do it.
Yeah, do you want me to run with the history? I can start a little bit with that.
Start it off, Chris.
As I'm sure a bunch of the audience may know at this point, we're Dialect. I'm Chris, I'm the founder and CEO. And 3 weeks ago, a little over 3 weeks ago, we launched a new technology platform and protocol in collaboration with Solana Foundation called Actions and Blockchain Links, or brilliantly Blinks, which I love. It's just been great to see the ecosystem rally around that. And Actions and Blinks, which we'll get into the distinction between the two. I'm like really excited to like jam on that live with you, Nick, on the call, because I think that's a main question a lot of people have. But Actions and Blinks let you share Solana anywhere. And today on the internet, sharing means grabbing a URL, dropping it in a chat or tweeting it or whatever, and other people see that URL and they click it and it takes them to a site. the beauty of Actions and Blinks is the URL has superpowers, and with the right technology in place, and that's its own interesting discussion, you have this thing unfurl to more than a link preview. So you can tweet a Blink URL and a user will see this thing unfurl directly on Twitter with like image, title, description, and stuff you'd expect from a link preview, but then actual buttons you can click to connect your wallet to Twitter like a dApp and actually sign transactions right from your timeline. And it is like in many ways a vision that both Solana Foundation in various guises and Dialect in various guises has been going after for as long as I've been building Dialect. This idea of like unfurling the internet and making experiences shareable is really what we've been going after here. And so they're called Actions and Blinks. They launched on June 25th, so it's a little over 3 weeks ago. But to your point, James, there is a very long history to this technology. And I would dial it all the way back to March of 2022, I think was when Solana Pay was introduced. Spoiler alert, Solana Pay is like, it has this technology inside of it that is incredible. And it's called the transaction request specification. And Actions and Blinks are a repackaging, rebranding, and also in some ways, in some critical ways, an upgrade to the Solana Pay transaction request spec. So Nick, you were saying this a few minutes ago, like there's some serendipity that happened early this year around what kicked off the Actions and Blinks initiative, around like fulfilling the promise of Solana Pay. But truly speaking, the technology goes all the way back to early 22. I'll also just make a shameless small plug for Dialect. January 18th of 2022, I vividly remember this, the like idea for the smart message came to me. And just a quick story there. So Solana Pay launched in March 22. Dialect, we launched early 22 with developer tools. The thing that got the whole ecosystem excited about the tools that we were offering was this thing we called the smart message, which was exactly the same as an action in Blink, very similar to the Solana Pay transaction, which is like send messages, receive alerts from dApps, and then buttons on them allow you to take the action right from the message. So like Solana Pay and Solana early 22 Dialect, we ended up building that smart message technology on top of Solana Pay. But the idea was on January 18th, 2022, and I was like, wait a second, the wallet lets you do anything from anywhere. It's like this universal sign-in to anything. You can use any product anywhere, anytime. And it was totally serendipitous. I ended up in DMs with Jordan Sexton on Twitter. I'd never met the guy ever. And he's like, it's so funny you mentioned this. We're working on this thing called Solana Pay. It's launching in a couple weeks. I can get my the technology you need. So there has been this really strong symbiosis now for over 2 years between Solana and Dialect on what I believe to be one of the two true pillars of crypto, which is this ability to unfurl the internet and give people experiences no matter where they are. I'm going to pause there because the actual story of like how the Actions and Blinks kicked off is also, I think, pretty interesting. But that's a little bit of the spiritual history. Nick, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, Jordan Sexton, the man behind Solana Pay, basically.
Right?
Yeah,
and so many other things.
And so many other things. Can't even begin to list them all.
That's right.
But like from my perspective of like seeing Dialect working so closely with many of you recently, it seems like the idea of like Dialect smart messages that you guys, like you said, have been working on for so long now is like, in many ways is like the first version of Actions, where it's like you guys kind of proved out the concept of like, hey, these actionable messages, being able to click, interact, and then like Solana Actions and Blinks is like a generic interface specification that anyone can use now, and it's just like expanding more and more. It's so good to watch.
That's exactly right. And like there's a story there, and I didn't explicitly say this before, but like very brief journey of Dialects. We launched early 22. We were tools for alerts, and we ended up powering alerts for a ton of our favorite projects across the ecosystem. Big part of that sales process for us and inspiring teams to work with us was the smart message, which we very candidly build as like, this thing is built on top of Solana Pay. So you're running on rails that are at the foundational Solana level, like specs and protocols that are being built across the ecosystem. we debuted at Breakpoint the smart message specification late 2022. I was on the developer stage and we had this slide with like 50 launch partners. We published our tools, which was really like Solana Pay plus a little extra, which we can talk about, like in terms of the roadmap for Blinks, which we're really excited about. And then, like, it was the last day of the conference. I didn't get to enjoy any of the conference at all because I was like grinding to get this launch out, grinding to get my talk together. Finally, get like one nice evening, and then the very next day, FTX implodes. And like within a few weeks, everybody on that partnership slide was either working on something else because they were just trying to survive that like detonation in the crypto community, or two, unfortunately, had to shut down. So early 2023. We're looking around and we're like, well, we've got nobody to sell this cool technology to. So why don't we build our own messaging app? And so we launched Dialect, the messaging app that was powered by smart messages, native integration directly into the messages. Incredibly cool experience. Some of the most fun we've had. We're also just like, well, what are people going to do with the smart messages? Because there's not a lot happening on Solana right now. You know, it's like really in crypto generally. This is the deepest part of bear markets. We're like, let's make a new NFT asset class that you can trade and make trustless offers on, send and receive funds. We're like, well, what kind of NFT would you want to use in a chat? And we're like, oh, chat stickers. And so we created a new NFT asset class, these chat stickers, and it just took off like way more than we ever expected. And so we went down this rabbit hole through first half of 2023, just trying to keep up with all this demand for these like NFT chat stickers. And the UX was incredible. You could like trade, make trustless offers. It's some of the most fun I've ever had in crypto. And we had some of our early users telling us it was like some of the most fun they had. But I want to be really clear, it was like us looking for a way to demo the technology. It was not our actual mission. And I'll spare you the story because I don't think it's that interesting for this call. But we are back at Developer Tools and the kind of, actually, no, I'll tell the brief part about like how this happened. Breakpoint 2023, I'm looking around, I'm saying like market's coming back. Solana's having a really good time. I really want to build developer tools. And I had this like zany idea. I'm like, what if we actually just opened up the smart message tech for anybody to use anywhere? Like, what if anybody could use this? And I got some early blank stares from people. I won't name any specific people. And I was just like, I don't know. Like, and so we experimented in Telegram. And then almost immediately after the Telegram launch, this might have been, we launched this Telegram experience in late January. I think it was early February. John Wong reached out and he's like, Chris, have you thought about taking Solana Pay or smart messages and generalizing it and doing something else with it? And I was like, actually, as a matter of fact, I have. And I think it was the inspiration of hearing someone with the vision that John has to really give me the conviction after a really deep bear market that there is an opportunity here. So it was like an electric moment for me. Like my hand was off screen, but I just snapped really loud. It was this electric moment for me personally. And so a huge amount of credit goes to John for this, to like have approached me independently on an idea that I'd been noodling on for a while. And so it was immediately we're off to the races. So anyway, that's my story up to the ideation. Nick, I would love to hear how you got involved.
Yeah, it sounds like I actually came in basically like right after John had kind of brought the idea to you of actions, like the idea of Solana Pay, specifically like transaction requests, like since inception, basically since transaction requests were added every couple of months, people are like, wow, we should really rename this. And everyone's
Right.
like, oh, we just don't have a good name, and people propose them, and it was never quite right. And yeah, John kind of brought up this idea. He's like, hey, what are your thoughts on like this idea? And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And like anytime I hear any idea, my mind immediately goes to implementation of like, oh, how could it work? And it's like smart messages that you're basically the idea of smart messages. So I immediately thought of you all at Dialect, and started like noodling on the idea through just DMs with the two of us, John and I. And then we just kept talking and was like, hey, you want to like, we're going to do this thing. Like, let's do it. You want to jump in on documentation? We're definitely going to need documentation. I was like, yeah, sure. And then it was like dev tooling and like the spec, and kind of like it all unfurled after that.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and yeah, there it is. So now, yeah, like you mentioned 3 or so weeks ago, actions hit the public, and the funny thing from the behind the scenes that Chris and I got to see, and a bunch of people at Dialect and a couple of people at Foundation, is that this like from like once the group of us committed to working on it, it was about 2 months, give or take, of like pedal to the metal, like let's get this thing out, like all of this dev tooling, all of this documentation, convincing all of these launch partners to get on board, convincing wallets to get on board. And the majority of that, full credit to Dialect. Like, oh my goodness, you all are amazing.
Decent high level of share there, but thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, the team just cranked like crazy.
And now
So
we
they-
have actions and blinks.
Now we have actions and blinks. I'm gonna carry most of my questions under the assumption that people in the audience have seen a blink, right? Like
There's a chance they haven't, which is like
That's what we need
my
to fix.
singular objective now. Like, how do we
Okay.
make these more discoverable? But yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah,
We'll make sure we have like a link to a tweet or something,
Cool.
you know, where people can see that in the show notes.
And how
just-
people can see them. We'll also link to that as well.
I was gonna say real fast. Let's discuss that because there are some sort of prerequisites on the user side to be able to see this unfurling, if you will. So I think I know what the prerequisites are, but so I don't miss anything, I'm going to ask you guys to fill people in on that. If I see a link that is in fact a blink, what do I have to have set up on my computer in order to see that appropriately?
Yeah, so maybe I'll answer your question in a super long-winded way by providing a little bit more backstory. And it's really just that we had this idea, and the real question at that point, like, you know, we sort of noodled on the idea for a little while, starting in like early February, I think. But then like Nick mentioned, we sort of got started in earnest a little later. There was during this period, a lot of ideation on, well, great. It's great to say, what if we could like unfurl the internet and like let people share Solana everywhere? But like, good luck getting things to actually unfurl in Twitter or in WhatsApp or in Telegram. Like these platforms are not designed for that. And so one of the things that we do at Dialect is we also power alerts. And so for a good while, and I still think this is like one of the best use cases for actions long term, is actually in alerts. And that's just out of scope for this conversation. But that was like a big part of the push, the go-to-market for us at Dialect. But then John had a conversation at, I'm forgetting, it was the Jupiter co-hosted conference in Vietnam. Is that right? And
don't know.
I'm going to end up misquoting this, but to my recollection, On from Super Team said, well, Chrome extensions can, if you have a Chrome extension installed in the browser, Chrome extensions can read and modify the web page, like the DOM. And so why don't you just detect these links and change them with a Chrome extension? And then I think the next insight, I remember John DMing me about this, and I was just like, oh my God, this is the answer. Like, sorry, gonna keep this. Holy cow. I don't know your policy on
we say bad
profanity.
words all the time.
Okay, holy shit.
Too many.
John messaged me. I think he was literally there in that moment. He's like, oh my God, we can do a Chrome extension. We can do it right from the wallet. And this was the big insight. And again, I want to just say, like, this is not distribution, and discoverability and shareability is not solved today, but oh man, did we come up with a really clever,
really good,
and really
distribution
community-driven
method
from people in the ecosystem, all this, a really clever, elegant solution. It's basically this. Literally everybody who's a crypto user today has a Chrome extension installed in their browser. Everybody. And the superpower of Chrome extensions that's been used since day one in crypto is the ability to send transactions to the Chrome extension, which securely holds your keys. So you're not exposing your private keys to like other products. So it's like how web crypto works today. It's got its own problems, but yes, this is like what the existing crew used. There's this other superpower of Chrome extensions, which is like in the productivity SaaS world. It's like any company that ever applies to Y Combinator, the YC people will be like, if you want to build a productivity company, like don't build a productivity app, build a Chrome extension that adds an additional feature to Google Sheets. And it's because there's this other superpower that Chrome extensions can read the web page and they can actually like make modifications to it. And so like hiding in plain sight is this incredible ability to like let the Chrome extension, which everyone already has, perform the power of detecting these links with user permission, of course, but like detect these links and unfurl them. So that was the big aha, and it completely transformed the intent of the launch. And I think the launch wouldn't have been a fraction as successful as it was without this ability. So, James, to answer your question, today, the way you can interact with Blinks is, and we'll get into like how businesses and devs and creators build Blinks, but assume there's a URL on the internet. It could truly just be a URL to a regular dApp site. So like, for example, if you go to juke.ag, you want to swap 2 tokens, you pick those 2 tokens from their swap interface, it actually changes the URL. Today, they were one of our launch partners. So if you copy that URL and you just tweet it out, if you have Phantom, Backpack, now Solflare, they just launched yesterday at the time of this recording, OKX wallets, so we're already seeing some other multi-chain wallets start to get more involved. If you have Blinks enabled from within that wallet, you go into their settings, you find the feature, and you turn it on, then just by scrolling Twitter, that link, Phantom or Backpack or Solflare, whoever, will detect that it is a Blink. Also another interesting technical conversation. It will detect that that's a Blink, and it will just say, nope, I'm not going to show you a stupid link preview. I'm going to show you this incredible Blink, and it's right there. So that's the discoverability. But as cool as that is, and I really think that's what like lit the sky on fire with this launch, was just like how didn't need to download any new apps, you didn't need to do any new installations. You just turn a feature on in a product you already know and love. So kudos to our launch partners for that one as well, like the wallets especially. That's what lit up everybody's imagination. Now, the problem, and the reason why I said why is there a discoverability problem issue right now, is that there are a lot of things that need to be true at the same time. You need to be on web in a browser that supports Chrome extensions with a Chrome extension like one of these, like Phantom, Backpack, Solflare, or KX. And you need to have gone in and turned the feature on. They're not on by default. And the combination of all 5 of those really narrows the segment of the market. And there turns out there's just so much more excitement and creativity around these than there is actual discoverability and accessibility. So one of our main initiatives now, together with Nick and Solana Foundation, is like, how do we make these things more discoverable and accessible? But that's kind of the flow today. Twitter web with Chrome extension, and it's magic. It's really cool, but it's in this narrow space.
Yeah. I'll sort of talk to my personal experience here. Nick knows that like basically launch day, I was a little bit of a wet blanket, and I was like, well, hold on, I do my normal browsing in a separate browser from where I do crypto, right? Like, because I just for sort of security reasons, I'm trying to sort of segregate like what I'm doing on crypto from just like everything else that I do. In large part because of the fact that Chrome extensions can modify the DOM, and because because I'm trying to sort of steer clear of that. That being said, I was like, this is too cool to not just go try it out. And so I obviously jump onto Twitter on, the Brave browser where I have these wallet extensions installed and check it out. It is relatively straightforward, right? Like I'm saying this for our listeners' sakes, right? Like for our
relatively,
it's not.
I just mean like how do we make this thing more usable? Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, no, I agree. I think we should totally have that brainstorm session. Obviously, you guys are already having it, so we don't actually have to have it here if you don't want. But just for the listeners, it is pretty straightforward. It's like just go on whatever browser you already have your wallet extension installed. Make sure you go into the settings and enable this setting, and you will magically see these things appear on on tweets where they're linked, and it's super cool. I do think, like I would love to see an extension that's maybe dedicated to Blinks that I can put on my normal browser, where it's like it's not a wallet, and maybe it unfurls like a QR code that I can do from mobile. So like they are still kind of segregated, but I still get the
QR codes,
magical unfurling. I'm sure you guys already have plans, and I'm not trying to leak anything. And by the way,
we actually do have
anything,
a dedicated Dialect Blinks extension that allows you to choose the wallet. It's open. I think it's open source. It should be. Rough few weeks. I'm not actually sure what's open source. That one should be, because it's meant to be our reference of like, this is how you integrate Blinks into your Chrome extension. I love that suggestion, James, of like, what if I can actually have it do a different thing that allows me to take an action, because what it does is it just pipes the transaction to Phantom or Backpack or similar. But maybe there's like could surface a QR code. That's cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways.
Use the mobile wallet, so like that was my sort of go-to. It's like that'd be neat. Sorry, Nick, I spoke over.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna say there's a lot of different ways that like it's. I said this to someone earlier. I was like, we're still early, and I hate when people say that, but there is there's so much passion around Blinks and Actions right now. Not even just this call, like the rest of the ecosystem. Like we are getting it from all sides in every possible
It's
good way.
like inundated.
It is amazing. And there's like everyone has these amazing ideas, and we're just like, yes, we want that too. We're just like, oh, it's almost there. And like there's a lot of ways that Blinks can and very likely will be surfaced to people in the future. Right now, like Chris has laid out, it is, you have to basically hit these different floodgates in order to have this feature enabled. There's a lot of ways where like we want it enabled by default. We want it on other websites and other services. We want it on other platforms, not just desktop. There's a lot of different ways that this can play out. There's a lot of engineering that has to go into it, and a lot of implementation and like adoption too. Getting wallet buy-in is one big one. Like that's just the easiest way to get distribution and like capabilities in the hands of the users. So we are very much pushing that in a lot of ways, and encouraging all ecosystems, or all partners in the ecosystem and like companies in the ecosystem to help us help everyone adopt the technology, I guess is probably the best way to phrase that.
Yeah.
Well, for what it's worth, you guys are fighting like an uphill battle, not against the crypto ecosystem, but just the general, sort of environment of the internet right now.
Yeah.
Which is like the early days of the internet was all about open source specs and how do we all adopt the same thing. And then it's sort of over time turned into these sort of internet like mega companies that are like, oh, we've got Google doing their thing here, Apple doing their thing here, Twitter does its thing here, and it is sort of intentionally trying to block people out, and you're trying to intentionally bring people in and say this is an open spec that we want everyone to adopt, and so you're fighting the good fight, and I am like I think it's going to be huge, but Nick, even though you don't love saying it, it is early. And especially when you think about the walls that are trying to be broken down to allow for this sort of like broader open ecosystem.
Yeah, I will say the beauty of exponentials is you're always early. Like, just that's
true. That's true.
So Nick, I'm glad I saw you tweet that earlier today, and I feel it. And like the other thing is, I love I think it's the Jeff Bezos Amazon thing of like it's always day zero. Like we should always feel like most of our work is ahead of us. And James, you nailed it. Like this is really, I think it's a big idea. Like crypto truly to me is like two pillars of innovation. One of them is the arbitrarily small, like creation of arbitrarily small amounts of value, like creation and destruction in the way that the internet was the creation of arbitrarily small amounts of information. And we profoundly underestimated the creation of information, like how seamless the internet made that, like how much that transformed the world. And preaching to the choir here, of course, of like with the creation of value, it's going to just completely transform the world. This other pillar, though, of crypto is, I think, like the smaller one that people don't see as much, which is this ability to really own who you are everywhere. And this other aspect of ownership is the ability to do things. And so this read, write, own paradigm that Chris Dixon kicked off, to me, I started Dialect because of like read, write everywhere, and own. And it's the write everywhere is just such a foundational thing about how I think the internet should be designed. And so you're right, we're like swinging for the fences here. And honestly, I think collaboration with Solana makes that like a real shot, because I do think blockchains are going to eat the world. And I do think Solana wouldn't be building here if I didn't feel that way.
Yeah.
And then like the last
wouldn't have these like 15 logos you can see all around me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The last quick point I would make on this is like, in a way, like Blinks are forcing us to think more about like, what did we do right or wrong about the link preview? Because the URL is inherently a social object. And the link preview is our best shot at making URLs accessible, educational, informative, entertaining, like to know what it is you're sharing. Like, I think the link preview is one of the best things to have happened to the internet. But like, if you look at what they're actually capable of, it's so little. And it's weird because there was a little bit of customization, a little bit of like product specific information. Like Twitter has its own dedicated like open graph metadata that's actually different than a regular site. And then we just like came to a screeching halt and nothing happened. And so like I really do think there's like really profound internet level things to be done here. The challenge, of course, is the adoption, the fragmentation. Teams and companies want to vertically integrate. There's a weird tug, like push and pull here, or like tug of war, or whatever the metaphor is, of in a way, Blinks help super apps and aggregators because
Very
when you
help
share
them
a
a
link,
lot.
currently you go off to another platform, but here you would stay. And so I think there's a weird sort of like, I think your point still stands, James, that like that's the uphill battle we fight, but there is also this strange like, here's a technology that promises to sort of like make the internet more eclectic, more like you can do a lot of things in different places. But then it also has this force of like it actually would make your feed on one of the super apps more sticky. And so
well, look, I obviously agree with you because I'm in the space. I think it's going to require some convincing for folks at, for example, Twitter or WhatsApp or but if they were to enable something like this through their own adoption of these protocols, that would be amazing.
yes,
That would instantly transform the way that I use the internet. If you could, like if Blinks would unfurl in iMessage, for example, that would be fucking awesome. I would just subscribe to all of my favorite crypto things via text message, and just like all of a sudden 90% of my
SMS.
crypto interactions
incredible.
would happen right there in iMessage, and that would be amazing. Or Slack, or insert whatever messaging app, whatever news feed app you use, whether it's Twitter, whether whatever. That would be insanely amazing. And I think what you guys are doing right now is sort of like proving that out by almost forcing the unfurling, right?
Yes.
And not even almost. Like you are literally forcing the website to unfurl Blinks, right? Which is super cool.
And that's kind of the power of Blinks that like people, I think, subconsciously realize it, but I like to make them consciously realize it. It's that right now, like we have Blinks on Twitter. There's I think 100 live separate domains that are like live, and there's like 300 or so Blinks have been created in the last like 3 weeks, all doing different things, built by different people. It's been amazing. We are basically making it so this works on Twitter. The Twitter developers had to do nothing to enable this because of the superpower that browser extensions have. So like having that ability to have this, once you have the distribution of the browser extensions, you can put it on any website with some caveats. Like there's definitely some pitfalls, and like, UI, making it so it's a good user experience is very, very important for this, I think. And I believe Chris would also agree with that. But the hard thing about the further adoption, but also the easy thing, is that native integration onto these platforms. Basically, we are able, this whole group of everyone that's doing anything with Blinks, we're proving out that it works and that people are interested. We're proving market adoption, basically, and encouraging platforms to integrate it natively, so that way they can also provide a native experience that might make more sense on their particular platform, whether that's on desktop browsing or on mobile, or on a native application. Like, you have Slack installed, you have Discord installed on your computer. Having the native interaction takes it to the next level. And because the specification is so generic and so easy to work with, it's basically just JSON. Like under the hood actions, they're JSON, and that's it. It's JSON, right? Super easy to work with. Every developer knows. Most developers love JSON. Some don't. Probably like Trent. Trent probably hates JSON. But he's not going to watch this.
No, he's not.
The power is that because it's so easy to do, once platforms start to have it natively, especially on mobile, it unlocks the entire experience. Because like Chris is describing, is from like the perspective of someone who's building a product, say Twitter. The Twitter developers, they have a mobile app. Their whole goal is to have people use their app, stay in app. All of these mechanisms, the whole like algorithm, the feed, it's trying to get people to stay in app But if you can have the ability to interact and transfer value, interact out of app, but never leave the app, you boost that stickiness in that mobile interaction because you're bringing crypto to people. You're bringing that value transfer creation, those interactions to people. It's taking the concept of like the link preview, which like the read, write, own, that's the read part. You can read it, you can see it, you see the images, you see the text. Being able to write to those and own it, being able to interact, that's the superpower here that like, this is the vision that we're pushing.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we get like we could sort of talk like the philosophical battle here all day. I do want to talk a little bit about the mechanics, right? So we sort of touched a little bit on the mechanics of Blinks and how they work in terms of the display, right? The Chrome extensions are making changes to the DOM itself. There's obviously more happening here with Solana Actions generally. So can we dig in there just a little bit? Which of you wants to take a quick overview of sort of the technical nature of this?
I'll do it, Chris. I've been working on this pitch. I've been trying to refine it. Let me know what you. I don't think you've heard this version of it yet. So, Blinks and Actions, Solana Actions, blockchain links, Blinks, cutely loved. Which, fun fact, I actually told John Wong that I hate the name Blinks when you first brought it up. I was like, I just don't like it, and then he finally convinced me. So you have these two different, very related technologies. Solana Actions, think of it like the backend. It's the backend, typical Web 2 backend API. It's a REST API. It returns JSON. It's returning very simple bits of text that gives it to the UI layer, the front end, which is the Blink itself. It's the rendering part that actually gives the user interface, the ability to connect a wallet, click buttons, do user input, show images, all that good stuff. That's the UI layer, the front end, the Blink. How it works is when you share those links on Twitter or anywhere else that Blinks are supported, these browser extensions, they basically check the metadata on these links. They figure out if it is a Blink, if it has this metadata, it gets the metadata, which is actually the action part of it on the back end, brings it into the front end, and the Blink does the rendering that allows the user to actually interact with it.
That checks out for me. And there was actually this like, Nick, that was great. That was excellent. And there was this like month-long period where we're all just like, wait, which part's the Blink, which part's the action? But what's really fascinating is like, I'm just going to be frank. I hope nobody's insulted by this. It was a little bit of like a motivated by marketing. We were all calling these actions until someone, I think it was pretty sure it was Cash Dender from Super Team, came up with the name Blink.
For sure it was.
And it just spread. And I think there were a lot of strong opinions about it. Absolutely, in hindsight, it was the right move. I'll admit there was a period of time where it's just like, when you have more nouns, that's a bad thing usually. And so I always want to try to keep the language to a minimum. So I was struggling with it for a little bit, but like there's this thing that fell out of it while we were talking about it that I actually think the distinction that Nick just went through is really profound. So maybe I can share a little context around like how you might use these differently. That gets me really excited. And like Nick said, actions are these like headless, non-interface services, REST APIs for the construction and delivery of transactions that you can submit to the blockchain. Soon it'll be any signable payload. Nick's got a spec coming together also from Solana Pay for signed message, which is if you want to authenticate and perform an action off chain. But it truly is just this like headless API for the hyper portability of transactions. And honestly, any product kind of should be built this way. A lot of transactions today are actually like what constructs the transaction is a bunch of JavaScript that was delivered from a website running in your browser. And when you tap the button on a website, like with a normal dApp, it might actually be that the transaction is getting constructed just like in your client-side website code. I think all dApps should eventually just use this model where you're like pulling a transaction from a service. There's a lot of good design reasons for why you should do this. But that's just one example of like, not all actions are meant to be served as Blinks. And in the future, what I really, really, really want is people just build their apps, build their dApps, build their experiences. And any button in their app, they actually just use the actions framework to wire up the button to something that you want to do. And then you're just got all these things. And then like magically, what ends up happening is that means out of the box, that action in your site, if you so choose as a developer to make it as something shareable that your users can share, then boom, you've got it like out of the box in this other place. So Blinks are a highly opinionated way to deliver this like boxed up, like portable, fully self-contained like interface for actions APIs. So you like point like a blink at an action URL and it unfurls it, like introspects and unfurls it with all this stuff. But I think any one action endpoint can actually just power so many other experiences, like alerts, like we talked about, like we want to wire this into alerts. But the really big one that I get insanely excited about is I just want people building their products with actions. And I would like bear with me, just indulge me for one more minute. There's a metaphor that I love, which is how I've been thinking about this for a long time. Is like 15 years ago, about maybe, we were seeing like kind of Web 2 was maturing and more apps were being built, not just sites, but now like true web apps. And back then, there was this concept of like a single page application. Now, literally every app on the internet is like a single page application, but you're just building. Now, React is like the modern framework for this. And Next.js is even better. But like people would build all these views. You'd be clicking links, following navigation through your app, and the URL was not changing as you navigated through the site. And so the site was basically unshareable. It was also just really annoying because if you refresh the browser, you just lost it. And one of the great modern developments, or like one of the great best developments in modern web development in the last 15 years has been these frameworks for the URLification of the pages in your site. So like React, and then React, I think it's like React Router. Now really the best modern framework is Next.js. And literally when you're building your web app, Next.js, you just create like files and folders, and anything you put in that file or folder determines the URL structure on your site. And so you're building with a kind of hygienic sense of the shareability and the URLification of the pages on your site. And now this powers the whole shareable internet. What we want to do with actions is give people, just rewinding back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, give people the tools to just build their products with an action stack. And by construction, now you get action shareability like out of the box. And so that's sort of like the essence and the spirit of the distinction between these two. And like the last 3 months happened really fast, but I think this is a beautiful design to the system. And that's why we have this distinction, or just one of many reasons why we have this distinction between actions and blinks.
Got it. I actually really like that. As a software developer, like the modularity, if you will, of actions, where it's like, hey, if you make everything, every user action, right, a Solana action in your app, then boom, you can turn it into a blink whenever you want. Which
instant composability.
Which is really, really cool. I think, and probably tickles the brain of a lot of developers who are listening, because it is sort of this inherently like magical thing, and that's why we all do this, right? that's why we do software development. Is sort of the magic at the end
fun.
of it.
It's a kind of expression, yeah. And maybe one other point on what Nick was sharing earlier, I just want to like really emphasize what he said. When you are developing Blinks as a developer today, meaning you're like building your own action, it's Phantom that's like rendering the Blink, Backpack, Solfate, the other wallets, rendering the Blink. They're constructing the UI. And what Nick was saying is you're building what we call an action provider, and you have no worries about building front-end development. You don't have to be laying buttons down. You don't have to be writing any HTML or React or anything like that. So there's this other thing. We had this opinionated approach of like time to developer success mattered early on over sort of like full configurability of your UI. Now there's been a ton of feedback of like, hey, why can't I move things around? Why can't I customize my UI? I think in the fullness of time, and Nick, you're spearheading the effort on greater flexibility and control right now. But the other thing that I feel like we aced about the launch was you can get one of these things up and running. The time to developer success is insanely short with actions. And that's what's so fun about this. Like the reason we're seeing so many of these is the developer experience is so clean. And so that's the other superpower, I think, to this design framework is you can just get up and running so quickly.
Yeah, I've heard feedback from a lot of people of like a lot of Web3 developers, blockchain developers, whatever you want to call them. They largely don't like building the user interface. They are self-proclaimed not good at it, and the industry also agrees with them. Like Web3 UI generally looks terrible, but now with Actions and Blinks, like you can build the action, you can build the backend, you can build the Rust contract, the Rust program, and you don't have to worry about the UI in a lot of cases. Time to developer success just shoots through the roof. Or well, I guess time goes down, success goes up. Yeah.
Yes.
You could theoretically, using this, just create a backend for your app.
Exactly.
And then not even have a front end and have it be entirely through shareable links on social, right?
Yes.
Shout out to Dialect there. Dial.2, this amazing tool product that basically Dialect has built. Dial.2, you can go to it and you can have that experience. You can, as a developer, you can just build the backend and then you can get the shareable link and you can get the user interface fully built for you by using Dialect's basically interstitial website is what we call it. Their interstitial website does all of the backend stuff. It makes the requests, it checks your API, gets all the metadata, displays the UI to the user, and now you have a fully functional UI. You can connect wallet, sign transactions, go through that whole thing just by making your backend, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
James and Nick, you hit the nail on the head. We want to see more people build these kinds of interstitial or pop-up sites. Actually, like a few weeks ago, I looked up the historic. You know how like you can Google a word and it'll show you like for the last 150 years the usage of the word in the English language. I was looking at the word interstitial because like since John said it
I haven't
first,
heard it in a while, actually.
as a team, like meaning Dialect and Solana, the word interstitial has been like under relentless use, and it really describes this really well what this Dialect 2 is. But you're getting at this really powerful, and actually it's down pretty bad. So let's bring it back again, meaning the frequency of the word.
We're taking it back.
What Nick was saying, James, what you're saying here, there's actually some incredible new kind of like non-skeuomorphic internet experiences for startups, developers, and creators to go to market with their ideas. And it's exactly what you just said. With Actions, you actually can get started without ever having to build an app or a front end. You can start sharing your experience. We've seen this now from some like incredible examples in the ecosystem. So I don't know the breakdown right now from the like 300-ish actions that have been built, but a very large number of them are indie developers, teams just getting started who decided instead of building a website or a mobile app that they could actually just get that first test with the market through an action. And that's really cool. Like to me, that is this new thing that didn't exist before in any meaningful capacity. Like it's a really creative new engine.
Yeah, I'll add to that just a little bit. It's not only through an action, but through social discovery. Because right now they work on Twitter, so you share a link on Twitter and you get the full experience. You get, discoverability of your social media handles. Users are interacting with it, and you can get that immediate feedback, and that is really, really great.
Yeah. So just to cap it off, the way that dial.to works is when you're actually developers use it today together with what Nick built on blinks.xyz, right? There's a developer flow for like testing your actions, seeing if it's working. And then once it's done, it really, if you look at the URL on the bar for your Blinks, this is like really clean, sort of like halfway between what feels like a typical kind of like internet card for like displaying NFTs, stuff like that. Or like, I like to think of it as like Stripe checkout, but for any write action on the blockchain. It's just this clean, simple, super portable thing. There's dial.to / and then I'll spare you the syntax sugar here, but then effectively the URL inside the URL. And this was something that John, I think Nick, you as well, really championed this idea. That's the fully just like, here's an action on the internet and here's the client in which I want to sign it or take the action. That composability of two URLs, we want to see more people building these. And I think that's like a super interesting design space.
So is just as we're sort of coming to time, I want to make sure the listeners know where to find resources here, and obviously we'll put it in the show notes. But I just want it to be audible here as well. What is there a definitive like tutorial for how do I go from 0 to 1 at creating Solana actions and Blinks?
I would say the easiest place to get started is go to the Solana documentation. It's just Blinks and actions are in the normal Solana documentation, solana.com/doc/actions. Then within there's a getting started section. It talks about, the whole spec is laid out there. And then it links out to like some video tutorials and and everything, a bunch of code examples. It links out to Dialect's resources as well. And I'll also say, check out Dialect's documentation for a lot of the UI side, the Blink side, and all their amazing resources as well.
Really good point, Nick. So yeah, if you're interested, and like, never said this at the beginning of the call, see you guys in post-production, like taking this last bit, putting it back at the beginning. The relationship between Dialect and Solana, other than that, I think we're like truly deeply spiritually aligned on the opportunity and the potential of this kind of technology, is that Solana, this is a Solana specification. It's a Solana protocol. We're contributors to that. We're part of the working group. We're very actively engaged. The other half of it is, at Dialect, we believe that every great spec or protocol on the internet needs great technology companies and technology stacks on top. And so I think the Solana docs are the best out there today. We've got some documentation as well, but we're also really like this, and go to dialect.to to get started with that. And we're really also this like technology stack on top. And so we're powering, we don't have a ton of tools on the actions provider side yet, but we're going to be building more of those soon. What we power today is, like Nick was just saying, we power every Blink in production today. So Phantom integrated our SDK, Backpack integrated, Solflare, OKX. We've got, I think, almost a dozen more coming now too. They use our Blinks GitHub. It's on GitHub. They use our Blinks client. And this does two things. Number one is it does all the UI rendering. Like when you point at an action URL, it does the introspection and the unfurling to give you that interface. And it's now, as of just a few days ago, fully stylable and customizable. You can get it fully on brand with your product, no matter the environments. Like Phantom's got purple buttons, Solfare's got orange buttons. We're seeing more and more customization coming for different platforms. But then the other new thing is, it doesn't have to be through a Chrome extension. I want to see incredible Web3 native products integrating Blinks directly into their apps. And that means, instead of actually trying to do a hack with a Chrome extension, you can actually just import Dialect's Blinks SDK and natively just like pass a URL to this React component, and boom, it unfurls, and you can customize the styles fully for your brand. So that's where we've ended up, I think, having the biggest lift. And we're going to be really deeply invested in making sure that the whole ecosystem is aligned on a single technology, a single implementation, so that when an actions developer is trying to decide how to build their thing, they're not targeting kind of like a messy, heterogeneous set of clients. So that's where we're putting most of our time. And what's coming next beyond React is other programming languages, and most importantly, mobile. So like seeing native mobile implementations of Blinks is going to be a huge design space that we're really excited about. But yeah, anyway, that's my last plug.
You can't throw out mobile plug at the tail end. I just want to. All right.
Have to have Chris back.
I know. I look forward to hearing more about what's what's coming on mobile. I obviously, like I mentioned earlier, most of my usage is on mobile, so I'm like, what's coming? Yeah. What is that?
We've got a long way to go. We're still early.
We're trying to go from 0 to 1 on mobile right now.
That is amazing. Are there any final plugs, Chris, that you want to make for what Dialect is working on? You sort of mentioned briefly that you guys have pivoted since our last episode, and it's not just Dialect the messaging app, but back to Dialect the developer tooling. Is there anything you want to say to the audience, who I think are mostly developers, about how to interact with Dialect, how to use what you guys are creating?
Yeah, I mean, like, we're tools for devs. We love building for devs. We love building for businesses and creative teams. So we really try to make an incredible developer experience. And so first plug is, like, if there's something you don't like, let us know. If there's something you love, let us know. Like, we love to work with new teams. Second plug is we're hiring. And so if you're looking to join a team that knows how to continuously take shots on goal on like a single vision and really push to like try to change the internet, we're aiming for the really long-term vision here. So yeah, I think that's it. Those are all the plugs that I've got.
Okay, sounds great. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us for a second time. I'm thrilled that we got to do this. I think we should do it more often. Yeah, let's do this again.
Yeah, thank you, James.
Nick, thanks for shifting into a little bit of like a interviewee role today.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that.
Excited to have you back as a co-host here soon.
And I'll say one of my favorite yet as a result of that. It's really great to be on here with you all because Nick really just like maybe I've already said this, it's like times a flat circle, but like Nick really, I don't think this launch, like you were such a critical part of this launch. Like it's some of the most fun that I've had, and it's fun to just be like on
It's been
like hashing it out on a call directly with you on the podcast.
Yeah. It's been, I mean, I was going to shamelessly plug that you guys are hiring at Dialect. Like I've gotten a chance to work very closely with a lot of your engineers at Dialect and you yourself and non-engineers at your company, and like top tier team. If anyone's looking for a
I
job,
appreciate that.
reach out. The Dialect team is amazing. Firsthand experience. Amazing.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate that.
Let's go.
Such a pleasure,
Let's
guys.
go.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you to all the listeners. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks for being here.
Bye-bye. Blink and you might
Bye.
miss it.
Blink and you might miss it.